Well, hello, 你好，欢迎回来，Welcome back to Wisdom Wednesday with Johnny Dagger on December 22nd, 2021. As the weather gets colder and colder, I am very much reluctant to eat uh, cold food. And what do I mean by cold food? Well, things like fruit salad, cereal for breakfast, or uh, regular salad, uh, sushi, uh, any of those cold meal food and stuff like that. But honestly, I have always been a little bit particular or more partial toward hot food, warm food. You give me a bowl of oatmeal in the morning, I can be quite happy with that. But if you want me to wake up and enjoy a bowl of cereal for breakfast, I am going to be very lacking on enthusiasm. Uh, I can eat a big plate of stir-fried vegetable for dinner, no problem. I don't necessarily always have to have meat. Uh, I can have a lot of fun with Buddhist feast. That's one of my favorite vegetarian dishes. If you guys have never tried it, next time you go to a Chinese restaurant and if you see a Buddhist feast on the menu, I highly recommend giving it a try because when it's made by a good restaurant, a good chef, a Buddhist feast is to die for. Especially for people like myself who actually do enjoy a great variety of vegetables. However, take those same vegetables, put them in the plate in front of me, uh, uncooked, cold, and with salad dressing, and you'll see that I suddenly lose all my enthusiasm. Many people asked me that before. Well, what's wrong with cereal? What's wrong with salad? Why don't you like them? Is it the taste? Is it the texture? And I said, no. Uh, it's because I'm Chinese, and cold food it kind of offends my sensitivity. Now, I will admit it right here that statement is not strictly true. Uh, Chinese people do have our own cold dishes that we enjoy. For example, a lot of people ask me before, why is it when you order barbecue chicken or barbecue duck or barbecue pork at a Chinese restaurant, it's never warm? It's usually at the most you're going to get it's like lukewarm. That, but a lot of times they give it to you and it's cold. Uh, some of my more uh, white or North American friends often ask me, what's wrong with Chinese restaurant? They don't know how to use a microwave or what? Who the heck want to eat cold, slimy, fatty meat like barbecue duck? Why would you want to eat that cold? So you see, Chinese people, we have our own uh, uh, things, our own set of dishes, a lot of the meat dishes that are served cold. Chinese people are also very big into preserved vegetables in some areas, which are usually also served cold. However, the thing with cold food in China, it's very rarely served to someone as a main dish. Uh, Chinese people believe in uh, really putting a lot of work into cooking. So quite often, when you are serving food to others, you want to stew this, fry that, bake this, and broil that. And there's a lot of work that going to, it's like a pride that go into the cooking. So to invite someone over and serve them cold food as an entree or as a main dish, it's a little bit of a disgrace in a lot of people's mind. However, when we serve cold food, it's in the form of appetizers, similar to uh, meal salad, how you would have a salad before you get your ribeye steak or uh, a rack of ribs or something like that. So in those cases, we do have cold food. It's just people don't generally eat them as a main source. Uh, and very, very rarely will you get cold food for breakfast. Chinese people, for the majority, believe that when you first wake up, your stomach is very sensitive and you shouldn't drink anything cold and you shouldn't eat anything cold when you first wake up. You should treat your stomach gently in the morning by introducing something warm and comfortable to it. With that said, there are two official occasions for Chinese people that we would eat nothing but cold food on those two special occasions. The first one is the Qingming or the Kingming, depending on which dialect you want to come from. Qingming or Kingming festival or holiday, aka the Tomb Sweeping Day. This is usually on the 5th or 6th of April, in middle of spring, in other words, where Chinese people would take a lot of fruit and flowers and meat and alcohol, and they would go to the cemetery and they would clean up around the graves and tombs of their ancestors, and they would sit there and worship and pay respect to the ancestors with these food items and flowers and these uh, offerings. Now, obviously, you can bring a lot of good stuff, but it's unlikely that your ancestor will actually get out of the grave and eat them. It's unlikely that the gods or goddesses would actually appear in front of you and eat that uh, 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 3 cup wine chicken or that Hainan chicken or that beautifully made uh, roast beef. So for the most part, after you pay your respect, after you say your prayer, then people pack out these nice food and they either have a picnic right there in the cemetery, or they take this day and go on a picnic somewhere in the forest or somewhere, go on a hike or go camping to enjoy the spring occasion, the spring day. Now, the Qingming holiday has been in practice as far back as 600, year 600. So it's about almost 1500 years old. So obviously back then, people didn't have thermoses, they didn't have lunch boxes that could keep their food warm, they didn't have coolers, they didn't have insulated bags that can keep food warm. So to prevent a whole lot of unnecessarily troubles and hassles, people decided, okay, on this day, because by the time we get to the cemetery and sweep the tombs and pull out the weeds and lay down the flowers and say the prayer, everything's going to be cold anyway. So we will eat nothing but cold food on this day, because we are bringing cold food to our ancestors. So obviously it would be wrong for our ancestors to be offered cold food while we are enjoying hot food, warm food at home. So this day, everyone will eat nothing but cold food. Uh, so that is one of the two occasions for Chinese people that officially people eat nothing but cold food. It's a Qingming festival, the Qingming holiday, aka the Tomb Sweeping Day or the Ancestors' Day. The second one, which is actually where the Qingming holiday derived from, yet is a very lesser known holiday that a lot of people do not observe anymore today. It's actually called the Cold Food Day. The Cold Food Day. Uh, Now, the Cold Food Day have two uh, more concrete origins or possible origins, and they are both quite interesting. The first, my personal favorite, because it is almost like uh, a tragic, beautifully tragic tale, uh, was that there was a Chinese emperor about 630 BC. 630 BC. There was a Chinese emperor who was defeated in battle and he was exiled. And while he was in exile, he was uh, very poor. So suffice to say, even though he was an emperor and he had people that were following him from places to places, he didn't really have money or gold or influences. So uh, one day, the emperor and his people ran out of food, and for days and days they traveled and they couldn't find anyone that would give them food. They couldn't find anyone that would take pity upon them. The emperor at the time was very, very sick, and the starvation did not help matter. In the end, one of his most trusted advisors took a knife and cut a big chunk of flesh from his own thigh, not the emperor's thigh, the advisor's. So the advisor took a knife and cut a piece of flesh from his own thigh and offered it to the emperor, and they were able to keep the emperor fed and alive with that piece of flesh. I mean, we have no idea how big a chunk of flesh that was, and it's kind of gruesome when you think about it. This is like cannibalism in a very weird way. Um, but anyway, uh, the advisor mutilated himself for the sake of the emperor. I mean, talk about loyalty, eh? Uh, and as luck would have it, a few years later, this emperor was able to defeat his enemy and have a comeback and take back the kingdom that he lost. After he took back the kingdom, the emperor started to hand out nobilities and rewards and gold and armor and great weapons and treasures to all the generals and all the warriors, all the ministers that helped him during his exile. But during this big award ceremony, he forgot the one most important person. He forgot to reward the guy who mutilated his own leg to feed the emperor. The advisor was so heartbroken that he wrote a letter of resignation and left it in the palace for the emperor. And then he took his aging mother, and the two of them uh, ran off into the woods and became, well, hippies, sort of. They basically went and uh, ran away and went and hid out in the woods so no one could find them. When the emperor found the letter that the advisor wrote him, he was really ashamed of himself. He's like, yeah, yeah, I remember that guy. He, yeah, he tasted pretty good anyway. No, no, I mean the emperor didn't say that, but you know, That's just my imagination, what the emperor might have thought. But the emperor was really ashamed of himself. The guy cut off a piece of his own flesh to feed me, and I forgot about him. Oh man, that's very crummy of me. So the emperor ordered his royal guard to go search the woods and try to get the guy to come back so he could properly reward him. Well, by this time, the advisor was already pissed off and offended and heartbroken, so he told the royal guard to go home, to leave him alone, that he was not going to have anything else to do with the emperor. The emperor sent many royal guards, many advisors to go and try to talk some sense into this guy and apologized and wrote letters and promised wealth and power. This guy wouldn't budge. This guy just uh, stayed there in the cabin in the woods with his mom and wouldn't come back to the palace. Eventually, the emperor himself, went into the woods and trying to get the guy to forgive him, to come back to the palace and come out of the cabin so he can properly thank him for his service to the crown. Even the emperor himself went, and the guy was still stubborn and wouldn't budge, wouldn't even open the door for the emperor. Well, this was when the emperor made a kind of an error in judgment, and he was probably kind of annoyed and angry at this point too. Like, I mean, come on, okay, I forgot about you in the during the award ceremony, but I, I saw the error of my way. I sent people to come and fetch you. I came to get you myself, and you're giving us attitude. Like, what the heck, man? What the heck do you want? So the emperor came up with a lousy idea. The emperor commanded his royal guard to uh, burn down the forest, burn down the trees. His idea was if we set the forest on fire, if we set the cabin on fire, then you have to come out. Then once you come out, then we can have a proper conversation, and then we can go back to the palace, and I can reward you properly, and we can move on. We can be happy ever after. The emperor did not count on how stubborn the guy was. With the cabin and the trees on fire, the guy still wouldn't open the door, and in the end, him and his mother both died in the flame. The emperor was so horrified that he decreed that from that day on, every year on that day, there should not be any fire in any household. So everyone had to eat cold food from on that day every year is to commemorate this brave and loyal and stubborn advisor that once offered the emperor a piece of his own flesh. Like I said, that is a very tragic story and a kind of a WTF in many ways. Uh, there's another there's another origin of the Cold Food Day, which was that for the longest time, Chinese people were encouraged to not build any fire in the springtime, because traditionally in many parts of China, spring was the driest season. So here in North America, we see a lot of wildfires in the summertime. Well, back then in China, it was spring where you saw the most wildfire. So to stop uh, all these wildfire, this forest fire and house fire, the imperial court decreed that during the spring time, when it's really dry, no one is allowed to have any fire in their fireplaces. So this resulted in people uh, came up with a lot of creative ways to make edible, delicious cold food for Cold Food Day. Actually, back then it was more like a cold food month. Uh, Eventually, the later emperors decided that a whole month of nothing but cold food was too inhumane, so they uh, kind of uh, combined everything into just one day, a couple of days, and at the most 3 days, where they would have this no fire rule. Uh, so the Cold Food Day and the Qingming holiday they are the only 2 days in a year where Chinese people really go out of their way to eat cold food, such as cold smoked meat and cold rice and cold porridge, etc., etc., etc. But for the most part, Chinese people do tend to enjoy warm food a lot more than cold food.